Hi, I'm Karen Launchbaugh. I'm director of the Rangeland Center at the University of Idaho. It's that time of year again. I'd like to welcome you to the Fall Forum. The days are getting shorter, nights are getting cooler, and it might be time for us to kind of sit back and reflect at where we've been. And that's the theme of this year's Fall Forum: review, reimagine, and reposition. We've got some really thought-provoking speakers for you, so I hope you'll be able to take a little time off, and we're going to talk about what's happened in the last few decades. What are some ways we could reimagine our future, and then how could we reposition ourselves for that future? We're joined this year by the McClure Center for Public Policy Research and the Idaho section of the Society for Range Management. And this is time to just sit back and enjoy. So get comfortable. I hope you can join us for our Thursday afternoon, Thursday evening, and Friday event. And welcome to the Fall Forum.
Hi, I'm Katherine Himes, Director of the McClure Center for Public Policy Research at the University of Idaho. I want to echo Karen's warm welcome. Thanks so much for joining us for the Rangeland Fall Forum. The McClure Center is so pleased to partner with the Rangeland Center to bring the policy perspective to these important conversations. As Karen said, we encourage you to sit back and relax, but we're also going to ask you to think about the future of range. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, I'm Karen Launchbaugh. I'm director of the Rangeland Center at the University of Idaho. It's that time of year again. I'd like to welcome you to the Fall Forum. The days are getting shorter, nights are getting cooler, and it might be time for us to kind of sit back and reflect at where we've been. And that's the theme of this year's Fall Forum: review, reimagine, and reposition. We've got some really thought-provoking speakers for you, so I hope you'll be able to take a little time off, and we're going to talk about what's happened in the last few decades. What are some ways we could reimagine our future, and then how could we reposition ourselves for that future? We're joined this year by the McClure Center for Public Policy Research and the Idaho section of the Society for Range Management. And this is time to just sit back and enjoy. So get comfortable. I hope you can join us for our Thursday afternoon, Thursday evening, and Friday event. And welcome to the Fall Forum.
Hi, I'm Katherine Himes, Director of the McClure Center for Public Policy Research at the University of Idaho. I want to echo Karen's warm welcome. Thanks so much for joining us for the Rangeland Fall Forum. The McClure Center is so pleased to partner with the Rangeland Center to bring the policy perspective to these important conversations. As Karen said, we encourage you to sit back and relax, but we're also going to ask you to think about the future of range. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hello, everybody. Erica and others, can you hear me okay? Thumbs up. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much. So I'm excited that today is the Fall Forum. You know, it is fall, no doubt about it, and we have some really great speakers lined up to let you sit back and do some thinking. So you saw the introduction by myself and Katherine Himes from the McClure Center, and of course we're joined by the Idaho section of the Society for Range Management. But basically what we have in common is we all care about rangelands, and you probably know that the Rangeland Center is the group of people on the campus and across the state that work for the University of Idaho who care about rangelands. Our motto is science and solutions for the range. And in this Fall Forum, we're going to show you some of that science, and with some help from partners, we're going to try to ponder some solutions. So I really look forward to the next few days. I know that life is busy. I hope that you appreciate that you didn't have to drive to anywhere in the state to do this. So please sit back and enjoy this discussion. I'm going to just give you just a few, I'm going to share my screen and give you just a few kind of ground rules for, sorry about that, there we go. Not, yes, I'm a professor. I should know how to do this. Here we go. What I was just hoping to do, although I just have too many screens open. So I just want to, I'll say it instead of write it, is that there is some things that you should know before you start, is that you are muted. So you can kind of come and go and we'll sort of never know it, but the speakers are on the screen and they'll be speaking, but you'll be muted. Also, we have door prizes. The Cowles Publishing here on campus has provided several books, including this Grass Book of Idaho and the Backpack Guide to Idaho. So you are automatically in the door prize session, you know, and able to do that. If you have questions, that's another thing. Along the bottom of your screen, you will see a Q&A. So if you have questions, go ahead and hit the Q&A. And Eric Winford, the Associate Director of the Rangeland Center, he's the one that's monitoring that, and he'll make sure that they come to the attention of the speakers. And then last but not least, if you're not a big Zoom user, up on the right-hand side, up on the top, there's a speaker view and other views. So sometimes if you're having trouble seeing the screen or seeing the speakers, you might just try one of those views up on the right-hand side. So we're doing great. I'm going to get you started now, and we're going to move to the first speakers. I will say that this first session is about reviewing kind of where we're at. Remember, this is review, reimagine, reposition. It'll be happening in 3 sessions, and the first session is on review. And you know, what better people to talk about what's happened on the land as people who live on the land. So we've chosen 2 of our favorite people, I think, the people that have been close to the Rangeland Center, and that's Wendy Pratt and her son Seth Pratt. So I wonder if you guys could turn your there we go, audio. There's Seth, and Wendy will have just hit her camera. So Seth and I'm going to start with you, Seth, since we can see you. You and I have known each other since you were a child. No, maybe not quite that long. By the time you came to college, I met you first when you came to the University of Idaho. And Seth is a graduate of agribusiness up here at the U of I. I also met him initially because he was a national officer of FFA, and I'm also an FFA member, as I hope many of you are. And so Seth, that must have been quite the experience, and sometime I'll try to learn more about that. Another thing that you did was took a pretty good interest, not just in agribusiness, but the political side of things. You did some internships, I remember, in Washington, D.C. and others. So I think your world experience is well beyond the ranch, and maybe you can tie some of those kind of life experiences to things that you learned growing up. And then Wendy Pratt. Wendy, I see you there in your office looking great. And I don't remember when we met, but I want to say that I'm very delighted that you were a rancher that was chosen to be a ranch partner on the planning committee for this Idaho Grouse and Grazing Project. And that's when we first got to know each other. That project is a pretty contentious or pretty touchy one, because the issues between grouse and cattle are a bit unknown, and some people think we should remove every cow from the face of the earth, and other people think that the cows are needed for the grouse. And our study is to really look at what is that interaction, and you provide us some really good insight on how is that going to look from the rancher side of the desk. So we scientists can do work, but we're not going to find solutions for the range unless we have folks like you. You're also excited that you have been appointed to the board of the Soil and Water Conservation District. So you're starting an advisory role with that group. So congratulations on that. And then, of course, you are a member, an outgoing member of the Partners Advisory Council for the Rangeland Center. And today, we've asked the 2 of you to think about what changes you've seen on the ranch. Wendy, you grew up on the ranch, and there were a couple generations before you. So I'm going to let you start, and I know that the 2 of you have talked about this, and just let us start to think about what it looks like from the rancher's side of the equation in terms of how things have changed out there.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Hi, everybody. See lots of friends out there. I'm going to go ahead and see how I do sharing my screen. How does that look?
Better than me.
Is that good? Okay.
Yes.
So, you know, sometimes I think the best thing we can do is share our story, whatever the venue, and so this idea of review, we just kind of really have been looking back at our history here at home, and we're just going to share with you our story. Hopefully, it fits within the context that you all had in mind. So this is where our ranch is located, outside of Blackfoot. And we split our operations between a valley operation at home, where we do pasture and feed cows in the winter. It's about 4,000 feet. And then we go east of us to the mountains of the Blackfoot River at about over 6,000 feet during the summer. That gets about 17 inches of precip, so it's very productive. It's intact range. We have different issues then that those ranchers that graze the deserts of Idaho. Okay, just a second. I got to figure out how to advance. There we go. So this is Mark, my husband, when he's a boy, and his grandparents, Bonnie and Eldro. And they bought the ranch from Eldro's dad, who immigrated from Wales and homesteaded our base property in 1904. Gradually, each successive generation has added additional land. And what was really important, Eldro got a hold of some grazing lease rights in the mountains and was able to expand his operation from kind of a hodgepodge of potatoes and hogs and chickens and milk cows and to focus on his beef herd, which was his love. It's always been a leap of faith to buy land. And we talk a lot about whether it's more difficult now. Frankly, outside investment money is pushing land up. So it's pretty difficult for cowboys to afford to purchase land. These are the folks that run the ranch today. You can see me and Mark and Seth and Leah next to us. And then Mark's mom and dad, Gary and Anita, are on the far left, and a super important couple, Jesse and Miley, that help us and have done so for over 10 years. This is a typical Saturday when Jesse and Miley bring their kids to help feed cows. Seth and Leah work remotely from the little original homestead house that you can see behind us. And all of these people are integral to the operation. And so when we talk a lot about the three legs of the stool of sustainability, especially like in outcome-based management, we talk about people, land, and money, or as we say in academia, the social, the ecological, and the financial aspects of when things are really working far into the future. That these people are happy, that they have a good quality of life is absolutely essential. And in the back is there's kind of this background of the economy, the economical parts of the ranch, and it's all got to work. We're really thankful that Seth and Leah can be on the ranch and available when we need them, but also they bring in outside money. I want to kind of do a quick year at a glance so that you guys can get a feel for our ranching model, because each ranching business has a different model, different way that they go about it. So this is the low elevation ranch, and our ranch is kind of juxtaposed against these large pivot farms. And that's one change we've seen over the years, is pieces of dry ground and small flood irrigated places have gone under pivots. And they're we keep ourselves pretty separate. We're either a farmer or a rancher, and we don't mix them up too much, which is one thing we'd like to see a change in the future. In the spring, we walk our cattle to our summer range. We'll go about 6 days, about 45 miles, and up about 2,000 feet in elevation. It's an old historical trail that has been used probably 150 years by folks in the valley. It's the way it's always been done with domestic livestock since cows were domesticated about 10,000 years ago, this following the green up in elevation. And Seth, don't you love this photo? It looks like we just do this all the time. The cattle are going to go right down the road. It's no worries. They're not going to go over in the grain. But actually, it's pretty marginally controlled chaos. And we don't know how much longer we'll be able to do it. So for 7 months, we'll have the cattle in the mountains, and we'll move between pastures that are either some that we own privately or some that we lease from the state of Idaho. And while we're doing that, running back and forth to the mountains, at home, we are making hay, grazing yearling calves, and irrigating twice a day. So come this time of year, it's telling my internet connection is unstable. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. It got behind on one of the images. We didn't see the flood irrigating one for very long.
Well, it was just a picture of the home farm.
No worries.
Okay.
Yeah, move on. That sounds great.
We truck the calves home in October. So we're looking at doing that in the next couple of weeks. And they will go on pastures at home for a month or two and then be put in a small feedlot. This has changed a lot. Mark's dad used to do it with a pitchfork and little bales and a lot of hand labor. Now we have a big feed wagon. We have large four-wheel drive tractors to keep the pens clean and them strawed. Works pretty good. And then back in the mountains, when the snow comes about early December, we put the cows on the road and they know how to get home. And then we'll feed until we start calving in March and April and start it all over again in May. You know how we talk about, everybody loves to talk about beaver dam analogs. So I came up with this as a migration analog. The wintering grounds of wild animals is pretty much taken over by farm ground. And so we bring our cows home and give them stored forage. We divert from both the Blackfoot and the Snake Rivers for our irrigation water, mostly flood. We do some pumping as well. But one of the things that is a little alarming right now is if what we depend on is inflows from snowpack that melts slowly into the soil profile and feeds those streams and springs that flow into the rivers throughout the summer season. So if we get more moisture as rain, this is a problem because our snowpack really is our reservoir. This is going up the trail. So the cattle are going through a gate onto BLM ground for the night. And when I was a kid, this was just a barbed wire fence. And where you see the cattle guard where Seth is on his horse there was just a gate. And it seems quaint now, but we would just shut the gate and expect anybody who came along on this public road to open and shut that gate. It's one of the many changes we've seen as more and more public use happens on range ground. And I was going to turn it to Seth here. He gave me a couple of slides that he wanted to talk about.
Yeah, sure. So recreation is something that I'm seeing more and hearing more about, both positive and negative. My generation is a social media dominated group of people. And what we used to do, right, when GPS units first came out, we did geocaching, right? It was this really novel thing to go find an item based on a coordinate. Well, now that has just become mainstream. If I'm on any social media platform looking at a photo, they can be geotagged and often are. So there used to be a lot of things in place to limit the amount of human traffic in an area, not all of which were directly planned. Many of those barriers were indirect. They were things like the quality of the road or simply the knowledge that a destination existed. So we're seeing those indirect barriers start to recede or come down. Geotagging certainly a part of it. You're now starting to see things on social media where it will say something like, "Keep Idaho wild, please tag responsibly." Don't put all your favorite honey holes out for public consumption. But the same technological advancement is influencing uses that have been on the land for a long time. So like hunting, it has become more and more common to do e-scouting. So if I'm planning my hunt, rather than doing that in August, I instead can do it the December, January, and February before from the comfort of my living room with Google Earth. And so geomapping, or the advancements in mapping technology, has changed how we plan recreation. Then let's say we're actually out on that hunt or that hike. The vague understanding of ownership lines used to be another indirect barrier, right? We weren't sure if it was private, we weren't sure if it was public. Let's just go to the area that we're confident is public. Well, now I can carry a map of land ownership in my pocket, and that is good in that it's providing greater opportunity on public lands. Where the challenge is coming in is that we've got a lot of land that we weren't used to this level of recreation on, and we don't have the infrastructure in place there yet to support it. The other indirect barrier was road quality. We talk about what the roads used to look like where we trail our cows, and how if it rained, you pretty much had to just forego any forward progress until the roads dried out. But now, I could drive a Buick LeSabre to where the cows are pretty easily. We've also seen improvements in vehicles. So used to be, if you wanted four-wheel drive, you had to buy a pickup. Not now. There's perfectly capable four-wheel drive minivans. And as time has passed, the number of old four-wheel drive pickups that you can pick up for a couple grand or even a few $100s, the number of those old pickups has of course grown. And so it's pretty easy for a newly permitted young driver to pick him up a cheap four-wheel drive pickup and head to the mountains. But by far and away, the biggest change in terms of motorized access has been ATVs. We see it anecdotally, just in our time in the mountains, the number of ATVs that come past. But we also see that not just in the vehicles themselves, but in the marks that they leave. Driving on established roadways is fine in the eyes of the other ranchers that we work with. It's trailblazing that causes the problems. But side-by-sides have put together a vehicle now that I can drive all day without getting a sore back, which is something that a four-wheeler and a motorbike never could do. And now these side-by-sides are becoming very, very common. As I think about that, for most vehicles, we have a permitting process, right? Almost all commercial vehicles do. Civilian use, of course, we've got permitting around passenger vehicles. But we do that mostly for human safety. We don't do it for ecological reasons. The one exception, though, is boats. So because of invasive species, we put together permitting on boats. And I'm afraid we're getting to a place where we're going to need to do that for ATVs. Mom, let's look at the herd migration photo. So that there's this great work being done out of Wyoming with what they call the Wyoming Migration Initiative. If Idaho had more coal and natural gas, I'm sure we'd have the money to do this too. But what we're looking at here is collar tracking data on the elk herds in the Greater Yellowstone. And so it's about 100 million acres, the overall Greater Yellowstone is. And you can see just the massive scale you have to have truly functioning natural ecological processes. And Mom, you mentioned, that we're artificially migrating a large herd by using the farm in the valley and the range ground up high. Essentially, this is exactly what we're mimicking, is these little patterns right here, where our herd would be much like some of the elk herds we see here in this photo. And when you don't have 100 million acres of contiguous resource on which these herds can move, you have to do things like trail cows down a paved road and bale hay to feed it to them in a small field over the winter. We're trying to artificially recreate this. Just two other things that are happening here is, and the whole impetus for the migration initiative is to protect these migration corridors. So when you cross-cut these with interstates and with subdivisions, you cut those lines on this image. One thing we're learning is that farms and ranches, by and large, do not cut these lines. And I certainly hope every farm and rancher is conscientious of that. I know there's mixed levels of conscientiousness, of course, but things like pavement and subdivisions, especially human settlement, causes the most disruption here. And so many of the same difficulties that these elk would have moving across the landscape, they're the same challenges that we face when we try to move cows, of keeping cows off of people's lawns and keeping cows out of ornamental landscaping. And these are just some of the challenges that we see interacting with both development and then, as mentioned earlier, recreation.
Hey, so back to the ranch. So ranching is no different than other industries in that the economies of scale are always working at us. So we've bought bigger equipment. We have a larger land base. We have a bigger herd. Two modern day tools that have really helped out a lot, and they're kind of low tech, and that's a four-wheeler and temporary electric fence. And this is just a string essentially that Mark has on a spool, and he can lay that out and step those posts in and create pastures where we never could before, and move them easily. And that's just all helps you to get control of time and timing. What's critical if you want to make some gains in the landscape with grazing. We spend more time, I would say, than our fathers or grandfathers did up in the mountains, moving cattle around and trying to manage that in a better fashion. There's a lot of off-stream pumping now to drinking water for cows to use, so they're not using live water. This is a permanent electric high tensile fence that we're moving cattle across right here, and it's something that we only have energized when the cattle are there. We will loosen that and turn it off for the winter. It's more wildlife friendly, it's cheaper to install, and it's easier to maintain. A few years back, we celebrated 100 years in our grazing association. And this is Mark's dad on the right. He's getting a Pendleton blanket for 30 years on the board. My great-grandmother was also a founding member of the association, so we have really deep roots with this organization. Idaho became a state in 1890, and so our association secured some of the very first state leases that were offered to ranchers. When we talk about the value of human relationships, the ones we have with other ranching members, as well as the state lands personnel, are just really critical. Tim, this one's for you. Our grandfathers dealt with weeds, but I think they'd just be shocked and horrified to face what we're facing, which is just these guys knocking at the doors of our ranch. This is hound's tongue. We're gathering it up because we didn't know it was there. It was already burred up, and those little burrs stick to the coats of our herding dogs and the cattle and horses. And another one we fight is spotted knapweed. But I wish these didn't invade healthy grasslands, but they do. And so I don't know how we're gonna fix it. It's something I think we really need more research on, to do it in a manner that we're not just gonna keep spraying and spraying and spraying, because I don't know if we're making progress there. The range is variable. This area is really heavy brush. It can sure grow sagebrush, and we're always controlling it in some manner, but how to be holistic about that and look towards what's causing it and how we can incorporate with our grazing strategies. This is a fire hazard. So what we'd really like to see is sage like this, and this is just another part of the range, and it's just in this case a part of a healthy, diverse system, and we get along great with it. One thing we know from just in our lifetimes, as well as historical writings from folks way back. My uncle was a beaver trapper for Fish and Game after beaver started to come back from the fur trapping eras. So we know a little bit about our range, and we know there's less beaver. This is just so interesting. I took this one in this photograph in 2008, and this guy or this family had but in 2019, I took another picture of this, and this is on the other side of that dam, but you can see it's all been silted in, covered with grass. The pond is still there after 11 years. Talk about ecosystem services. This guy really did us a favor. But kind of what disturbs me, maybe even more about this, is we drive by, ride by, push our cows by this pond every year without much thought to the work that beaver did. And that's concerning, because I think we tend to see the range as it is, not paying enough attention to what created it, what are the trends, what did it look like historically. And I even see this in our own kids. Do our kids know what they're missing? Because they just haven't seen it. It's that dang shifting, what is it? Shifting baseline syndrome. So this is me and Mark in the city, handing out some beef samples and talking to customers. We're part of a cooperative of ranchers called Country Natural Beef. Over the last, say, 25 years, a lot of ranchers have aligned themselves with what's called branded programs. A lot of you may be familiar with certified beef. That's another one where we actually sell into a specific program. And it's kind of changing the way we look at what we do for a living. It's not just selling calves into a feedlot or to a buyer. It's actually selling beef. And as great as these connections with the customer have been, it's also happened right alongside this backlash, this vilification of our industry. The latest is climate change, but we've been blamed for beef being unhealthy, that a plant-based diet is way better for us. Now we have fake meat and plant-based burgers. There's concerns about animal welfare and whether our cows are happy. They see grazing as extractive on the range rather than a natural process. It's discouraging, it's alarming, especially when we're now outnumbered. It's not going to get any better. As far as that goes, it's going to get worse, especially when the West is so attractive now, and of course we understand why. Another change that's really taken hold since COVID, but it was trending that way anyway, was people want to know where their food comes from, and they want to not be at the mercy of the supply in the grocery store. So one of the fun things our kids have done is Mark has always had a few grass-fed animals, but they're wanting to ramp up that end of the business. So this is Seth's wife, Leah, holding some of our beef that we had a local butcher take care of. It's been a fun added enterprise, and the kids have learned a ton about it. I like this photo because it's our women at work. This is our daughters and Leah, and they're up tending barbed wire, which is one thing that hasn't changed. This was invented in 1870, and it's still really effective. But it still sags and breaks under a snow load, and so yeah, they're fixing fence. Women have always been really important in the ranching industry, but they're kind of stepping out of the kitchen now, and they're taking some leadership roles, and that's a good thing. I think it'll be a game changer, really. They're good at communicating, they're patient with animals, and they're going to help take us into the future. One of the things that hasn't changed is this centerpiece of ranching, which is through grazing, you take sunlight energy that's been captured by plants, that basic process. Cattle are inefficient, which is a good thing. So part of it they put back on the soil to feed life in the soil and keep that cycle going. And then the rest of the course, they make a product that we're really proud of. It's a healthy food. So looking ahead, we know there are changes coming. We know our kids, the ranch is going to look different in the future. Our kids have a wide scope of interests. They want to do a lot of things. Maybe they're not just going to be cowboys like Mark and their mom. But building resiliency, what do? You work with partners. You always retain a willingness to learn. You try to ask the right questions. You believe in diversity. And I just love this shot. It shows diversity in a rangeland, but we also really need to think about diversity in our families, building capacity in relationships with agency folks like some are on this call, and conservationists and consumers, professionals and non-professionals, young and old. And it works on the ecosystem, and it works in the human ecosystem as well. And Seth, what future? Where are we headed in your eyes?
Oh goodness. Writ large, I mean, I think a good baseline is to always is to say that there's a 70% chance that the status quo will continue. So 70% of where we're going is similar to where we've been. I think that's kind of a safe first assumption. I think that economies of scale are going to continue to push the number of people per acre ratio wider and wider and wider. And that's not just on ranches, that's at agencies, that's at conservation NGOs across the board. And the urbanization of America is not going to slow down. We're moving towards a future where there are more people in urban centers and fewer people in rural areas, even though at the same time, more remote work is, I think, a positive trend overall. And we've got a lot of latent and underemployed talent on farms, ranches, and on small towns across the West that could contribute greatly. And so I look forward to them being able to do more of that. And certainly there's going to be people in Manhattan who are going to see the opportunity to live in Sun Valley and still have the same job, and they're going to take it. So tourism and some in-migration of fairly socioeconomically well-established folks to scenic areas, that's going to continue to happen as well. Invasive species, we all see it, but we don't have the macro data to be able to, conclusively say it's X tens of thousands of acres in Idaho. I mean, we try to get at it, but ultimately it's going to take landscape scale solutions to truly fix that. We're forever going to be carrying shovels and backpack sprayers trying to chase them, but you go hunt deer and you push pockets in the furthest reaches away from the roads and away from the cattle areas, and the damn hound's tongue is still there. I mean, it has moved past where people go and look for it. So I'm afraid she's here to stay. I don't see any huge changes coming there. And I'm still learning to what extent a person should put time into it every year trying to kill those buggers. So that's what I'll say for now.
Okay, well, I'm going to break in because I want to ask people out there if you've got some questions for Wendy or Seth to ask them. But Seth, since you're on my screen, I do have a question. You brought up this idea of how COVID has changed anything. And I know that you worked through COVID from that room probably. And I also know before that you traveled the world, you traveled all over. And so how do you think COVID changed the way that people think about this land or the value they have in it, just from your generation and this new skill that we now have? Told you to be philosophical.
I think more as far as how it impacts how they see this land. I mean, I think it has impacted what we think about social gatherings and what we think about health policy and what we think about remote work and offices but just this land specifically. Just look at what people have done with their weekends. I mean, the summit registries. So I climbed Bora for the third time in the middle of August, and the summit book on Bora was about half full. It was a pretty good size, kind of your typical moleskin journal. It was about half full. And the first entry in that book was July of 2020. So they filled half of a book in 45 days. So the number of people who now try to plan a weekend and knowing that they're not going to go to a football watch party, instead say, well, let's go for a hike. That number has climbed. And if they found out that they love it as much as I love it, or half as much as I love it, they're going to keep doing it, even after COVID. So the number of people who are going to be familiar with these places as a first-hand basis, that number of people is going to be higher. Now, whether or not, if you polled those same people and you asked them the question, what is rangeland? Would they know how to answer that? I think probably not. So it's a great opportunity to educate more people because we've got more attention though.
Great. Yeah, well, you and I are both optimists, and at least I think that is one nice output. And I'm going to ask for questions from Eric before I go on and hound you with questions, Wendy. So Eric is monitoring questions. Eric, do you have something out there?
Hi, yeah, and there's a couple of audience questions. I'll just pick some randomly and start. Any insights or advice for a younger person who is interested in becoming a rancher to assist in creating healthy ecosystems through focused grazing?
Sounds like you, Wendy.
Gosh, find a producer and go work with them. I think that's the best thing. Oh man, we would love to have somebody who's really willing to learn. It's hard. We hire people, but and it takes a long time before they start paying their wage. So that's one way. I think there's some great courses offered, say on soil health or in-home.
Karen, are you losing that audio?
I am. I'm hoping that she'll come back. Oh, there she is. So Wendy, we lost you for a second. You were talking about soil health. So just finish up that thought.
Yeah, I was just saying, be open to other courses. There's a lot offered out there, like grazing schools and ranching for profit schools and a soil health school to add to your resume.
Yeah, that's great. And Seth, can I ask you to address that too? I know that you, Seth, and I, we got lucky. We born on a ranch. I didn't have to do anything. But what about these students that are in my classes or your colleagues that really love this land? How could they ever get started? Great question.
I mean, I think two big ideas there. One is economies of scale are brutal, and it was a heck of a lot easier in the homestead era to get started than it is now. The best way, or at least the fastest way, is to find operations without heirs or without heirs that want to participate operationally and have the emotional skills, the social skills to build a relationship there where you can put yourself in an operator's shoes over time. Just coming in and starting from the ground up is really, really tough. The other big idea is it's something we don't do in the West quite enough, and that is separating kind of mineral rights from surface rights. There's a lot of people in Texas, Oklahoma, other areas where they have a wealth of mineral resources, where the person who owns the property subsurface is some big investment group or an energy company or somebody that lives in Dallas and their great granddad had a farm in Throckmorton, and that ownership is separated from the person who owns the surface rights. So if we can work out ways in collaboration with investment groups or investors for them to actually buy the land, but to provide you with, you know, a 20, 30, 50, 100 year surface lease where you can run the operation. I think that's the other way of the future for new operators to get involved. We just haven't done it a heck of a lot out here.
Those are two very big ideas, and I'd love to talk more about that, but I know Eric has some other good questions. So Eric, what are other people asking? Let's do one or more.
Yeah. So another question, there's a lot of great questions here. We won't get to them all, unfortunately, but another question is, as an operator, how do you see the increasingly popular outdoor recreation market and the interest in outdoor recreation being able to benefit the operator rather than hinder and satisfy the recreationists while helping to keep these open areas open?
That's a tough
You
one.
want to take a swing at that, Mom?
Not really, you go.
A couple of ideas. So Access Yes with Fish and Game has been, for the most part, successful program. There would be a way to build on this idea that when I get to the border of a property, there's some type of physical interface that I can either read about the operation that runs it, or I can read about some weeds that need eradicated that I'd love for you to identify, you know, hound's tongue or knapweed, and get rid of these things, or explanation as to why we need gates shut, or a number to call, maybe posted by the gate that says, hey, if there are cattle on this side of the fence, please call this number and let us know. I think more communication would be helpful. And there's an interesting thing starting in this kind of the social upheaval in our society right now around just being willing to confront others. And that's a tough thing to do when you're 100 miles from town. But if we just were more okay with calling somebody out when they're destroying a stream bank with a four-wheeler, I think that would be helpful. I also think that there would be a way to build some simple courses for a person to get a permit to operate an ATV on public land that would just be simple things about stream beds and cut banks and how we protect these important ecological items. So I think there's some opportunity for improvement and engagement there. How to turn recreation into a true asset for the ranches. I mean, if there's areas where it can be helpful, great, but I don't necessarily need to benefit from it. I would just wish that we could mutually coexist. And we don't post our ground. The private ground we've got, we welcome people to be on it, but we also don't unlock the gate so that they can drive four-wheelers on it. We welcome hikers and fishermen and hunters, but not motorized vehicles. We all need to get together and decide where that line needs to be drawn, I guess.
Wendy, did you have a quick response? Otherwise, I'll need to turn channels. Wendy, any thoughts?
No, I really don't have anything to add, Karen.
That's a tough one. I will say that I still am encouraged that many people who couldn't grow up on ranches can at least enjoy ranches, and there are solutions. We just haven't found them yet. So you, both Seth and Wendy, you've done an extremely good job of showing us how living on the land has changed. And especially it sounds like it's not just the land. The land is fine other than the weeds, and the cows are roughly the same. You do things a little bit differently, but it's the people who have changed. And so I want to thank you both. I have a wonderful book of poetry for both of you. It's range poetry. So I'm going to send that to you as appreciation for your time here. And I hope you take some time, sit back, maybe even out on the range and read some poetry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy and Seth. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
All right.
Thanks, Karen.
Yeah, thanks, Seth. I really appreciate it. Okay, now I'm going to turn attention to my two colleagues, Tim Prather and Glenn Shoemaker. So I'm going to turn attention